Remaking a game is pretty hard work. If you make it too similar to the original, then you might as well just stick with the original. If it's too different, then it feels like it isn't a faithful recreation. The best remakes, in my opinion, differentiate themselves from the original enough to still make the original worth playing, but the remake is, on the whole, superior. Thus far, Kirby's had 2 remakes. Extra Epic Yarn and Super Kirby Clash are not remakes, and while one of the remakes falls under this description, Nightmare in Dreamland doesn't have it as well. Believe it or not, there was a time where I legitimately hated this game. It feels very different from Kirby's Adventure for sure, but I thought it was exclusively for the worse. They removed some things that were really cool about Adventure, butchered the music, the backgrounds looked weird, and it somehow felt easier than Adventure. That last point I still kinda stand by, but more on the rest later. Nowadays, I obviously hold this game in a much higher regard. If I thought the last 2 games were great, obviously I think Nightmare in Dreamland is great. And no, I'm not setting anything up. I really enjoy Nightmare in Dreamland on its own merits. Yeah, compared to Kirby's Adventure, I still don't think it holds a candle, and considering it's a remake of that game, it's disappointing. For sure, my least favorite thing about this game is the music, but it's such a subjective topic. To me, GBA music is hard to make good, but when it's good, it's amazing. The problem is that it had to be made for the GBA. Plenty of amazing GBA soundtracks exist, in my opinion, but they were all made for the GBA. This was made for the NES, and I just don't think it translates well to the GBA. Again, music is very subjective though, so you could disagree, but listening to these 2 tracks side by side, for example, I just feel like it sounds so much better on the NES. Some rooms from Kirby's Adventure were just entirely replaced in this game. I'm generally okay with this, since for the most part, the replacements are fine, and what got replaced weren't the highlights of the game, with a glaring, very infamous exception to the rotating buildings of Butter Building. For whatever reason, this really cool, visually interesting, hardware-defying idea that worked the background into the gameplay was replaced with slowly disappearing fog. I really hate this, but quite frankly, I think I hate it enough to just make an entire video about it. So, to make that video a reality, I won't actually talk about it too much here. How's this? Let's do another like challenge. Get this video 100 likes, you'll get that video. There are some other things that rub me the wrong way about this game. I think enemies and bosses especially are just a bit too large. I always liked that none of them were that much larger than Kirby in Adventure, aside from Wispy Woods, of course, and I prefer the bright colored backgrounds made out of basic shapes from that game. But here's the thing, those are all compared to Kirby's Adventure. Standalone bosses being big, kinda cool. And the backgrounds being these trippy looking paintings, I think works. If I'm not mistaken, the other 2 Arica Kirby games reused some of these. That's how good they were. And even though I prefer Adventure in every other category, Undeniably, this game is much better for speedrunning than Adventure. You don't have to worry about the lag, you use way more than one ability for practically the whole thing if you're doing any percent, and because of those two factors, it feels a lot more engaging. I enjoy speedrunning Adventure, don't get me wrong, but Nightmare in Dreamland is simply the better game in this regard. On that note, this game does have some improvements to the controls. None of this means much to me, since I prefer how Adventure handles, if I'm being honest, but looking at the bigger picture, it's really hard to say, on a more objective level, that Nightmare in Dreamland didn't improve things on the control side. I appreciate being able to float by pressing A and not having to hold up. I appreciate how the momentum in Kirby Speed feels, and I definitely appreciate ice physics are more streamlined compared to Adventure. I appreciate all of this. It just doesn't mean much to me because I don't think it's a problem with Kirby's Adventure. I don't think I'm spoiling anything by saying I like Kirby's Adventure. If I think Nightmare in Dreamland is great and I prefer Adventure, then of course I like Adventure. Duh. And since Nightmare in Dreamland is largely the same game, it stands to reason that I like this game too. I just don't see much of a reason to play it over Adventure, at least for me. Adventure does just about everything better, and anything Nightmare in Dreamland exclusive is either nice but not a deal breaker, terrible, or somewhere in between. Great game, but not the best remake in the series. Oh boy, not by a long shot.